It's March Mania at Sports Interaction. We're talking NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, and more. Just a lot going on. A little stressed out.
It's mania.
It's manic. Let's go. Anyway, listen, crazy odds and the best live in play. Download the app in Ontario. Use that QR code at the bottom of the screen, or just head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's right. Thank you. To get started.
Good job.
19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Harini. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write a review as it really helps us grow the show. You can follow me on social media at Tim Harini. Australian Grand Prix review. And here to help me break it all down from F1, staff writer Samarth Kanal. Samarth, how are you, man?
Good. It has been a long day. I'm sure it's been longer for you, though. So, again, I'm not going to complain.
It's been a long one, man. It's like you had said, it's been a long one for everyone. Well, that was something. Chaotic race, obviously. Let's start at... oh, boy, where should we start? I mean, because there was 3, well, maybe 4 red flags if you count the one that I guess they threw at the end for Hulkenberg's car that pulled off track after the checkered flag. And only the 5th time in 36 years that this has happened. That stat coming from the BBC. Let's start with the first red flag for Alex Albon. So lap 6. At this point, Russell has taken the lead, and Albon has his crash. So Alex had said after the race that he went a bit wider on the exit of turn 5. He had his crash on the exit of turn 6 into 7. And he'd said, looking at the data... briefly, that he spiked the tire on the exit, and so by that he means the temperature of the tire, and then he thought that may have been the cause of why he had crashed. I mean, obviously Williams needs to score points when they can. Samarth, this could have been a very good race for them, but I mean, obviously we want to talk about the red flag, so yeah, what did you think of that first red flag? Was it, should they have thrown it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always in a tough situation working for F1. Because whatever I say might not be representative of what the company says, and that's fine. But I think they made the right call. I do. And I think Australia's... If you look at the history of the Australian Grand Prix, there has been an accident there in which a marshal got killed. That was 2 decades ago, I think. You know, you don't want to repeat that. I am always safety first. I know... People can be like, oh, it's draconian to throw a red flag, but with that much debris and gravel, cars go... And turn 7 is a fast right-hander. I think it's the right call to red flag it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then I think also the tire wall needed a bit of... I guess it might have been... I think they were using Tech Pro there. The wall itself needed some repairing as well. I mean, like you had said, there's a lot of debris on the track after that one, and it's easy to get cut tires going through that section because there's not a lot of room for drivers to maneuver around debris. And then I think there's also the off-track factor as well. I mean, you got a packed house there, sold out. I mean, for the entire weekend, there was over 440,000 people attending. I don't think people necessarily want to sit around and watch cars circulate for 15. Maybe 20 laps. That was it was almost a 20-minute red flag. So you're going to have cars circulating for that, close to that amount of period while they clean everything up. And I don't think necessarily fans want to see that. And plus, on the flip side of that, you're eating into the race, Samarth. It's taking away from the entire race that was shaping up to be a good one.
Yeah. And I'm relieved we got on-track time. I mean, yes, it was a long, as we said, it's been a long bloody day, but it's good to have track racing. And, I mean, I guess some people would question whether you're allowed to pit during a red flag. That's maybe the debate that some people are having. But then that would just reverse the situation, because it would mean if you didn't pit during the safety car, not everyone gets that chance. You have to be near you need to be near the pit entry to pit during the safety car, right? So you would be disadvantaged massively if you didn't get to pit during the red flag. Yeah, that's the big debate I guess people are having as well. I mean, people criticizing the FIA about throwing a safety car in Saudi Arabia, and again, I think they were almost airtight in their reasoning. You've got to protect the marshals. These people do a job that is tough. They don't often... I think a lot of them are voluntary. it's a really tough job. I wouldn't put them at risk. No point. Or the drivers, for that matter.
Yeah, and that's something that, we haven't really seen a lot of in the past, and it does seem like the FIA has really started to crack down on terms of safety with tractors coming out onto the track even, and I think that's one of the reasons why we got that second red flag, which we'll talk about in a bit, but you had that as well. On top of that, marshals on the track. I mean, I remember in the day when they wouldn't even throw a yellow flag for a marshal running on the track to catch debris.
It was like a mini sport in itself, watching marshals get up, and it's like a relay race. Oh, horrible.
Yeah. So for the red flag, I mean, obviously Russell pits from the lead when the safety car was out, and then he ends up getting done over by that red flag. I mean,
that stems the brakes, right?
Do you think he could have? Yeah, but do you think he could have won it? I think he could have had a chance. I mean, with both Mercedes up front, who knows what they could have done in terms of strategy?
Could he have won it? I mean, that's a big if. Verstappen, I mean, that car is on rails, and his pass on Hamilton, it just looked like so easy at one of the toughest corners on the track. That left-hander, turn 9, and then that turn 10. So you've got to get the car as wide as you can to hit turn 10 properly. Otherwise, you start picking up gravel, and you could go off track. You could crash. So yeah, I don't know. Could he have won? Maybe not. Could it have been a double Mercedes podium? Yeah.
I just think it would have been a little bit different though because of strategy. Like when you look at it, there wasn't two Red Bulls up front, right? There was just the one. So Max would have had to cover off one of them at some point, right? It just, who was it going to be? You know what I mean? Like who would have it been? So that's the only reason I say that there could have been an outside chance that Russell may have been able to win this thing, but I mean, whatever. Like, so lap 12, we carry on. Verstappen takes over the lead of the race, like you said. I mean, just blowing past Lewis. And then Russell has his failure on lap 18, which I believe it was power unit issue that he had suffered. I'm not sure if you know what exactly it was, because I haven't heard at this moment on my end.
I haven't seen exactly what it was. I'm guessing, obviously, with flames shooting out of the engine, it's definitely an engine issue. That's as far as my knowledge goes. But that's the most obvious thing ever. It was painful, though, I'll tell you that. And it's weird. It's weird. Second year of a new regulations, and reliability is still a concern. That's really weird to me. I thought they would have sussed all these problems out, but apparently not. It's really weird. At the start of the hybrid era, was it this bad? I don't know.
It was for some of the other teams. Yeah, not for Mercedes. I mean, that thing was bulletproof, but I think like some of the teams further back in the field was pretty bad. Like, I don't necessarily think Renault had a bulletproof engine, to start off the hybrid era. It wasn't that great, because I remember the arguments between Red Bull and Renault, and Red Bull wanting to leave their partnership with Renault, and then that turned into a thing, and then Bernie Ecclestone had to get involved and keep Renault at Red Bull. It was just a mess. So then we get Magnussen on lap 54, nail in the wall, and we have the second red flag of the race. Now, for this part of it, I got a text from the FIA just kind of explaining, which is great, by the way, because it's so handy to have them explain why exactly there are red flags. But yeah, this one was for the wheel rim, the debris that was spread over a wide area, and that was one of the main causes for the red flag. But as you kind of look into it further, there was marshals on track, but at the same time, you had a recovery vehicle on track. And in the past, we have seen and heard from drivers just very upset when they bring tractors out onto the racetrack, Samarth.
Yeah, I mean, we all know why there was that accident with Jules Bianchi, and it's a horrible memory, and we know why. I mean, it was Japan last year, was it, when Sainz was very vocal about it? And
same with Gasly.
Yeah, and Gasly. So it's the same track that Bianchi lost his life. You don't want it to happen. I completely agree with that. As for Magnussen's accident, pretty weird one. He said that he didn't feel anything. He just had a little touch with the barriers. So, such an odd one. I can't remember the last time I've just seen the tyre fall off like that. Obviously, when a tyre falls off, it's not just like a video game where the tyre just bounces around. Tyres have loads of metal straps inside, little bits of tread and lining, and Pirelli tyres will have even more than that. So, yeah, you don't want to drive over that stuff. That's proper stuff. So, yeah, I can see why they've done that.
And outside of that, I mean, we've heard of in the past, teams and F1 not wanting to finish under a red flag or a yellow flag situation. They want green flag running. And so this is what you get, man.
Yeah, I mean, jeez. That was... I still don't know what to say, which is obviously not what you want to hear when I'm on a podcast, but such a baffling thing. And it's... People are like, okay, it happened because of the Netflix effect, because Formula One wants quick entertainment. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think it has happened because teams probably have pressured the FIA in the past to have racing. And yeah, this is exactly what you get, right? We've set a precedent with this, so this is what we got. And it's so funny when I watch other series like IndyCar, NASCAR, when you throw a caution late in the race, you're like, this is just going to lead to more cautions, right? That's exactly what happened in F1. Cold tires, narrow track, people jostling for position. That's what happened. And I feel bad, I feel bad for the drivers. You must have watched the post-race interviews, but a lot of them were in a bad mood, like a really bad mood. And I felt really bad for them.
It's interesting because at the same time, you don't really know or how to judge, who's got an agenda, right? When it comes to these things.
I don't know if anyone really did have that much of an agenda in this one. It wasn't like, for example, the example that obviously comes to mind is Abu Dhabi 2021. The phrase I never want to say, but it's... Yeah, I don't know. This just felt like maybe the FIA wants to get everyone racing. I can see why. Like, people want to watch a race, right? Why would you want something to end? But I did feel bad for the drivers, especially... Well, there were so many incidents, so... Yeah. Yeah,
Verstappen had a good quote. I mean, he said at the end of this one during the FIA press conference, I just didn't understand why we needed a red flag. If you had a safety car and then a normal rolling start, we wouldn't have had all these shunts, and then you have a normal finish, so they created the problems themselves at the end of the day. I mean, he makes a good point on one part of it. I mean, why not just, instead of doing the standing start procedure after Magnussen's red flag, I mean, why not have that as a rolling start? Because you're less likely to get the carnage that we ended up seeing. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think they should have thrown a rolling start there? I mean, Verstappen, granted, does make a pretty good point with that one.
Yeah, no, he does. He obviously knows more than me because he is a racing driver, and I would probably believe him on that. But I was going to be like, who am I to disagree? But I don't know if a rolling start is a tough one as well. Those can go wrong. Like, yeah, I don't know necessarily if that would have fixed everything. Is there a series, in your opinion, that gets these things 100% right? Because
no.
I don't think there is.
No.
Maybe there's a smaller one. Like, I'm talking about a mainstream series or championship. I don't think there is.
No, I don't think. Okay, well, actually, you know what? We can probably use the IndyCar finish from today. So we're taping this Sunday, just as the IndyCar race finished. We might be able to use that as an example. I'm not sure if you caught it, but essentially, 2 laps before the finish, you had a pretty epic battle for the win. Grosjean crashes and brings out full course caution, and that pretty much seals the entire race. Newgarden comes around and wins it under those conditions. So there is that. And I only say that because, let's say, to do a complete lap of, Texas Motor Speedway takes you, 20 seconds. And like a full lap at the Australian Grand Prix is about 1 minute 17 at pace. and then you're going to be behind the pace car for 2 laps. So I see there's room there for racing.
Yeah. I think IndyCar got it right today, I think. And it is two different things, oval racing and circuit racing, but at the same time I would have probably just liked a more boring end to the race in that sense. Yeah, and you don't want to risk everyone's lives and effort and everything that whatever. There's so many people who have got stakes in that race. You don't want to do that. That's people getting injured and I don't even know about the cost of everything, right? Imagine in a cost cap era, both Alpines crashing out. I mean, it just yeah.
And that was that was the other part of it I was going to bring up. Having the Alpines crashed out, and then we go and basically for the next restart, which is them just rolling to the checkered flag, they're taking the starting drivers from the previous standing start. I don't know how you see that. That's tough because you can't really include the Alpines anymore because they're out of it. They're not going to take the checkered flag. So what do you do in that situation, Samarth? I mean, you know what I mean?
I don't envy them because I feel like that's such a hard thing, but I almost feel like it had kind of steamrolled and collected so much momentum that you're eventually going to be left with a really tough decision, and that's what happened. I think they'll be looking at that one. That's painful as well. I mean, imagine losing it on basically a penultimate lap and being told that's it, you don't have points. Or Hulkenberg, for example.
Oh yeah.
What happened to him? So I'm sure we'll get to that.
And then I was just going to say that you and I getting that email message. I think I got it at 6 a.m. I was coming in the front door from TSN. I got a text from you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, so Haas is protesting the provisional classification of the Australian Grand Prix." I don't see, and then obviously it was rejected. But I mean, why even bother?
Weird
why?
one.
Yeah,
because. Well, why even bother in terms of I kind of sympathise with them and I kind of see the point they're making?
I guess.
Do you not? Do you think?
No, not really, because the way that you look at it, I mean, if they've already made the call that they're going to take the starting positions from after Magnussen's crash, then. You
can't really argue with that,
what are you challenging? Yeah, exactly. What are you challenging at that point? That was.
Yeah, I wonder. Maybe they were just trying to see what they could get. It could also have been. So when was that classification taken? Well, the explanation is that you can't say who was ahead of whom because everyone has started crashing. If you look at a still freeze frame of that point, you can't say, De Vries was actually ahead of the Williams, even though they were both in the gravel or whatever. You don't know, so they have to put it back. Yeah, maybe Haas had no point there. It did make our mornings a lot longer. So thanks for that, Haas. Yeah. I almost knew they were going to do it when they sent the email. They sent the press email through, and it didn't have the results on it, and I was
I saw that too, because I was like, Haas isn't going to do anything about this, and I was looking at the press release, and I'm like, wait a second. It's on the drivers on it. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
It's such a funny sport, man.
Right?
Such a ridiculous world.
What are you guys up to?
Yeah.
I did actually. I wanted to go back to during this whole, third red flag chaos, and actually just touch on what had happened with Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. I mean, obviously, Carlos getting hit with that 5-second time penalty for running into Fernando. It is interesting. Even Fernando during the press conference, he even said he felt bad for Carlos and felt it was a little harsh, but then when I look at it, Samarth, it's like, well, what happens if they actually didn't end up taking the finishing order from after Magnussen's crash? and Alonso gets spun out. He's now dead last. Like, how happy
I don't think he would have been so. Yeah, he wouldn't have been so happy.
No,
the other thing is, it was still a silly move, right? In football or soccer, you make a bad tackle, and even if the referee's blown his whistle and play has stopped, you make a bad tackle, you hurt someone, or you take them out of the game. It's just a mistimed tackle. You'll still get punished for it, and rightly so. There is still a consequence to your action there. So people are like, oh, it didn't count because that lap didn't count. That doesn't mean the drivers just vanished into thin air. Mm-hmm. They still existed. Like, for example, if they crashed into each other coming back into the pits for a red flag, someone would have got punished, right? I think the logic there is, I think unfortunately Sainz kind of did deserve it in my opinion. He was furious after the race. He could barely speak. But I mean, yeah, he spun Alonso out. I mean, and a 5-second penalty, yeah, that's fine. Like, in fact, that was leniency, I think, on the part of the FIA. They said, yeah. So
yeah. I think one of the big things for Carlos on that restart, I don't think he had the greatest getaway. He hasn't really talked about it that much, but I don't think he had the greatest getaway, and like Gasly was right there, and both of them just going in way too hot. I mean, and I think another thing that was interesting on that restart was so many drivers struggling with warm-up. I mean, like we saw it with Logan Sargent. He actually had said that he was braking where he normally does brake on those restarts, but for that particular restart, he had trouble getting heat into the tire and into the brakes, and that's why he'd run into the back of De Vries. It sounded like that was the case for quite a few drivers, that including Stroll, when Stroll and Sainz were battling over third place going into T3 and Stroll goes off. I think again that has a lot to do with warm-up and things of that nature. I think he probably also had a bit of junk on his tires at the same time because he did go offline just a bit for Stroll. But just I think that thing with Carlos and with Gasly, it's kind of what it led to, and that's contact, right? I mean, they've been given 5-second time penalties for that for years now. So
yeah, it's not surprising. It's also not surprising that people were having trouble with warm-up. Let's not forget that this Australian Grand Prix took a long time, and it was nearing like the evening, like in Australia. So it's not that warm there, So the temperatures are way lower than in Saudi, way lower than in Jeddah, of course. So yeah, and Bahrain, sorry. So they had real trouble warming up their tires. Not surprising. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit more about Ferrari. I mean, because it's been a pretty dreadful first 3 races for them. Samarth, I mean, Leclerc getting beached off the start of the race. I mean, he in particular has had it pretty bad over the last 3 races, and I don't know if you're for Charles Leclerc, like, what hope is there to cling on here, man? Like, it's not good.
Yes. It's his worst start to a season since his debut F1 season 2018, and that's when he was with Sauber. So, what hope do you have to cling on? Great question. I mean, let's not forget that he doesn't have as many career wins as probably he'd like. So this is maybe a transitional year. This is something to work on, notch those numbers up. There are places he can win, and he's still waiting for that home win. He has... That for him would be amazing. So there's loads of hope. Loads of reasons to be optimistic. It's not like he's in a bad car. It's not like, it's who was it? Someone said that Mercedes act like they have a car that cannot make Q3. It's obviously not the case. I think Ferrari is the same. It's not that slow a car. They have loads of potential, and Leclerc has loads to fight for. But it was painful to see him just go off like that. And I think it was completely his mistake. I think he accepted it too. He turned in on, was it Stroll? Mm-hmm. Ironically, though, I think his teammate, Carlos Sainz, may have caused that inadvertently. So he slows, if you watch the replay, he kind of causes the cars behind him to concertina, which causes Leclerc to bump into Stroll, who was slowing down for a Sainz train ahead of him. So it was a very unfortunate mistake. He'll come back.
And the thing with Ferrari for this weekend coming into it, didn't introduce any upgrades, and it really sounds like they're not going to be doing much to this car until a more bigger upgrade comes to the car, but it really sounded like trying to focus more on setup for this car, where they've done in the previous 2 races. It was more of a one-lap sort of setup where they were about 2/10 off of the Red Bulls in qualifying, but then when they got into the race, the tire dag really just hammered them. And for this one, it sounded like setting up the car more for the race, but then again, that affects your one-lap pace, right? So, and I think all of it kind of points to them in these next 3 weeks that they have off here, not trying to chase their tails with data. You know what I mean? Like, if you introduce more upgrades to the car and you haven't really got a clear understanding for what you have, I think that would just throw a big wrench into what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, and they might... Yeah, I think you're right. They must not be one of the teams who are planning a massive upgrade for Azerbaijan, which is the next round. I don't think a lot of teams are. It's far away from a lot of teams' bases. It's not quite Australia, but it's up there. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if Ferrari are going to be exploring a Red Bull-style concept. They, their car is a different concept. It's pretty unique. Yeah, you're right. Do they understand the problems with tyre deg? It doesn't seem so. It seems like there's so much confusion going on there. Whereas Mercedes definitely seem to understand.
Yes.
Or at least the word coming out is that they understand, like, oh, this is what's wrong with the W14. This is what we're going to change. It's just going to take some time. We have a cost cap. We can't do everything at once. Same with Alpine, perhaps. I think Alpine are going to bring some upgrades soon. They said Baku. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on at Ferrari. But
it does really sound like they don't have a clear grasp of why they're suffering from so much tire degradation within the race. Because I remember, like, last season, this is something that they struggled with as well. I mean, aside from the strategy errors and then also on top of that, the reliability issues. But aside from those things, I thought they were going to have this sorted coming into this season. And whatever they bring in terms of upgrades that have to come next, it's going to have to be something that deals with tire deg in race format, because the one lap pace is there. It's the race that they just can't get a handle on these tires, man. It's so weird. You made a good point about Mercedes having like a good understanding for what their issues are. And I'm not sure if you heard this, like, but before coming into the Australian Grand Prix, I believe it was Andrew Shovlin kind of admitted that they actually knew they were going to have a lot of difficulties with the W14 before the season even got started. Like, before they came to the preseason testing, they kind of had an understanding that they're going to have some limitations with the W14. And so that's got me thinking, I think for Mercedes, I mean, they're going to have something big, and it sounds like it's going to be for Imola. Because I think this weekend, Toto Wolff had said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's essentially not wanting to bring little upgrades to the car. It's executing on something that's a bigger upgrade, and the car will be fundamentally and look different. So I'm assuming it's going to be like a B spec, and I'm also assuming that this has to be something that they've been tinkering away with in the wintertime. Because, like, to have something that big, like to flip it that fast, Samarth, I mean, you've got to be working on that in the winter, right?
I agree, and I think it makes sense that exactly everything you said there, Tim, just makes sense, because I think people have to understand how much effort it takes to literally change the fundamentals of your F1 car. And it makes sense that they just didn't have enough time to do that during the winter, perhaps. It also makes sense that you'd probably want to wait for the European leg if you're based in Europe. Mm-hmm. So we've got Azerbaijan, then Miami, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's far away. You don't want to bring, like, a new, let's say, floor, and then it breaks, and then you have to go back to England, and obviously my knowledge of logistics and freight, not that good. But, but you're right. But they seem to be so under control, and it would be great to see some proper Hamilton-Alonso fights in the future. I'd be happy, But, Mercedes can execute it, I think.
But it's interesting to watch them this weekend, in particular in the cooler temperatures, like cooler track conditions, and just I think like just not enough emphasis on running like loads of downforce on the car. So it's like a circuit that's more meant for like medium downforce, where when you get to tracks where there's like a lot of high downforce you need to put on the car, it really seems like they struggle massively in that department. So this was kind of like a track that I think really suited them, and that's why we saw the performances that we had seen. I don't think that they'll be able to keep that up, Samarth. It just seems like this was kind of the right temperatures, the right track conditions. And it kind of all just worked out for them on that level, where it's like if we go to like Miami, the track's a little bit longer, it's a lot hotter, and that's going to do different things to the tire. So I don't know what you think about that, but I just feel like this was sort of like the right sort of coming together everything for Mercedes this weekend.
It's funny you say that. It almost seems like Imola is their next great chance to score something. Azerbaijan's going to be a real tough one. It's going to be an experiment for everyone as well, having a sprint in the tight confines of a really tough circuit. God, that's going to be. I mean, I hope I'm not on the report for that one, but Imola could be a good chance for Mercedes, you know. And it's also funny you said that, because medium downforce, kind of like Sao Paulo, would you say that's a kind of medium downforcey circuit? And they did great there. So, I mean, they would kill for a win in the first 10 rounds. Great.
For sure. And I think it's possible. Like, I think if they whatever the upgrade is that they're going to bring, right? It's definitely going to be focused more aero heavy. So there's definitely going to be more downforce being added to this car. That's probably going to increase the drag on it a bit, unless they're able to, sort something out in that department. But I have a feeling like, Red Bull's got a great car right now, right? Like, they just do. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we get some other teams starting to challenge for wins later in this season. I don't know what you think about all that. I mean, I know the Red Bull is pretty spectacular, but I just think we're going to get some level of convergence at some point this season, and we're going to have a few teams pushing for wins.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the question. Christian Horner said the same thing. And, sometimes when someone in a team says it, you're like, they're just talking rubbish. Red Bull are going to absolutely ace it. But I think he's right. I think they have so much less wind tunnel time that they won't be able to... I mean, it just makes sense, right? They won't be able to develop at the same rate as an Aston or a Mercedes or Ferrari, and sooner or later, things are going to come back. And we've seen it in past seasons anyway, The development race is a really, really crucial thing in F1. That's not to say... I mean, they have such a great base, they have such a great car, but they have to focus on next year as well, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. What I'm trying to think is, like, which is the first race that you truly think that someone can eclipse them? Like, which is the first race? Imola or much farther away?
I would say, I think it would probably be after Imola, because I think if, let's say, Mercedes does introduce like a massive upgrade to their car for Imola, I just feel that it's not enough time to get a good understanding for what it likes and what it doesn't. So if we use preseason testing as an example, 3 days of testing the car, still not having a good understanding of it, and then you go into Bahrain, still not having a good understanding of it. You go to Jeddah, you're starting to understand it, and then you come to Australia, now you're getting a fuller picture of what your car is, what it can do, what it can't do, what are the strengths, weaknesses. And then I still think there's probably another race after that before you get an even clearer picture of what you actually have. And so I think if you introduce something that's pretty big, like, I just assume it's going to be like a B-spec type of race car. I mean, it kind of has to be at this point, but I think that takes a while to learn, though. No, like, what do you think? I honestly just think it would take at least a good 3 races for them to get a feel for what they've got.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed with all the teams. I think a lot of people are like, well, we don't know where we stand, and that's fair.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that really could take away a win is chaos, and we saw plenty of that today, which makes you think Monaco. I mean, I don't know. Spain's rejigged its last sector. They've taken away the... Canada last year was interesting.
Yep.
So let's see. I mean, look, anything can happen, but I don't think they'll win every race. Red Bull is just...
No.
And there's too many races.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen either. I just think there's going to be too many teams closing that gap and pushing for wins later in the season. As for a team that was closing the gap, McLaren. Okay, hear me out here. I honestly, the way things stood at this team at the beginning of the season through Bahrain and Jeddah, I mean, it looked really bad, Samarth, like really bad, where if it continued on that trajectory, they were going to be one of the worst teams on the grid. Like, and by worse, I mean they score points, but they don't necessarily move up in the constructors where they stay like 10th or 9th. Like, I honestly didn't think that they're looking at everything. I just didn't think that they were going to be very good this season. And then all the turmoil that's been happening behind the scenes of the team and the amount of restructuring they've been doing within their aero departments. I mean, that's a massive turnover that they've just had, and now they show up in Australia. I mean, granted, it was a crazy race, right? They score points, right? Oscar Piastri gets his first points, Lando Norris the same for the season, and boom, get some points, right? What do you think about McLaren moving forward? I mean, obviously they have a big upgrade plan for Baku, and then they've got 2 other big upgrades planned throughout later this season.
Yeah. The preseason noise was so negative, wasn't it? And it's something you don't want to see for any team, but someone so storied like McLaren, you know, with incredible history, it is painful. And then they executed it so well. It's funny, I was going to say they had their luck. Lando Norris said, we just didn't have unluck, which I love. And maybe he's right. Like, you know, they just weren't unlucky. Yeah. It was funny. He was like, we totally deserved it. We did everything. We've done everything right. And yeah, actually, should they have been one of the 2 teams not to have scored going into Australia? Probably not. They probably deserved a bit better. They're not that bad. You know, let's not forget that they are. It's still a fast car, I think. Yeah, it just needs a bit of work. And the midfield is so tight. I mean, it's tiny margins here. I don't think McLaren should be at the back of the midfield. It's a bit of a weird one, though, yeah. Slow corners is slow corners their big pitfall this season, right?
Looks like it, eh?
Azerbaijan could be a tough one because while it has a long straight there, it has slow corners. Yeah. And, they're going to be waiting for that upgrade. I think they said that it's coming in Baku, right?
Yes. So the first one will come in Baku. And then they're going to have another big upgrade that will come before the summer break. And then they're going to have another bigger upgrade that's going to come after summer break. And this is Andres Stella speaking to us on Thursday of last week. And yeah, he had explained that it's probably going to be something similar to like a B spec, like McLaren. And that's what I think for like Mercedes and maybe even potentially Ferrari, where it's like they're going to bring bigger things that are going to change a lot of the aero on the car. Valtteri Bottas, he has had one hell of a start to the season here. What are your thoughts on what's going on down there? Because I mean, like watching what happened to like just how off the pace he was in Jeddah, and then here as well in Australia.
Jeddah, he was like by himself, essentially. Was he the only driver to finish 1 lap down in Jeddah?
Let's have a look.
He was way down. I've just pulled that out, and now we have to look it up because
that's okay.
But he's struggled, and it's painful. I thought he caught a happier figure.
1 lap down.
He caught a happier figure. Joining Alfa Romeo, he seems more himself. He's leading the team. I don't know what the problems are. It's weird. I mean, Zhou has been doing a decent job in that car. I wouldn't say he's been lighting the world on fire a bit, but to see someone like Bottas, a multiple Grand Prix winner, fall off the pace like that,
it's pretty shocking. I mean, Valtteri coming home P11, but starting from pit lane because his qualifying was just not good at all. And same goes for... I think
he hit traffic.
Yeah.
I think he was furious at hitting traffic, which in Australia does happen, but at the same time, I mean, he's had a rotten...
Still off the pace.
Off the pace. baffling. He'll want to get back on it. I mean, he struggled in a few races last year as well, actually, you know?
Yeah, good point.
I think it was kind of mid-season where he had a real rough patch. But he can get out of them, so he's got some races coming up to prove that. Let's see. And there's a sprint, so there's more potential that he can weave his way through the field and do something crazy. Azerbaijan, we've seen it happen before. We've seen Gasly do it. We've seen Vettel do it. Who knows?
Yuki Tsunoda finally being able to come home in the top 10, score some points.
Well done, Yuki Tsunoda, dude.
He's got to be happy
because
about that, right?
Like, I think even they tweeted, "Please not P11 again." and we were all thinking, "Poor guy." I mean, I saw him after Saudi, and he was almost distraught as you could be finishing 11th, which is not a disrespectful place to finish. It's a good place to finish. It's not in the points, but he was like, he'd given everything, and then he'd probably done it here. And I'm glad he's got points. You know, he's actually done really a good job this season so far. I can see a shift in his mentality. He's definitely worked on himself over the winter, so fair play to him. He's got some pressure, though. He's got some pressure. There are some people in F2 that could probably make a claim to his seat. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
good
he's
point.
feeling it. Yeah, but he's done well.
Sprint format. You had mentioned Baku being our first sprint event of this season. F1 is trying to change the format for the sprint weekends, and F1 and the FIA, it sounds like they're discussing moving the sprint event out of the main sort of event weekend and doing another qualifying session just particularly for that sprint event. So it would be, I believe it was a Saturday, like Saturday morning or afternoon qualifying for the afternoon/evening sprint event on the Saturday. And then you're going to have your qualifying for the big Grand Prix. To set that grid, that qualifying will take place on a Friday. So rather than the results from the sprint race setting the grid for the main race on the Sunday like we've done in the past, and it sounds like they're trying to get this thing brought forward, this idea brought forward for Baku. Do you think they should be, messing around this much with their weekends and their events? I know there's been talk of like changing up and I know Stefano Domenicali did comment on maybe trying to do away with practice on the Friday or whatever, and trying to spice up the weekends to make every single day count. But I think this might be taking things just a tiny bit too far. I mean, this sounds like busy, and then you factor in crashing and crash damage and what happens and how much time do you have to get the car ready and turned around. Like,
it's a tough one. I mean, it's a tough one for me, especially because I can't come out and say this or that. But what I can say is that so I've heard a lot of drivers, I think they were asked it, was it Thursday press conference? On one of the many press conferences that we've had on this incredibly long weekend that seems to be never ending, they were asked about what would it be like at Azerbaijan, and also the fact that there is a sprint at Azerbaijan. I mean, that it's a tough venue, right? There's a lot of hesitation, I think. People are like, it's going to be a race of attrition, a weekend of attrition, sorry, not just a race, a weekend of attrition, and people are just going to have to survive, in a sense, right? I kind of sympathize with drivers there. They're giving their all. They're going extremely fast and risking their lives. So at the end of the day, if they're hesitant, I start to get hesitant, right? Don't you feel that? Like,
yep.
It's hard to watch. I don't know. I don't know what to think. I think Stefano went and clarified his comment about practice, saying that, he didn't necessarily want to say, like, why do we practice? I think he was just saying, we got to rethink things. And I do like it when F1 says, we have to rethink things. This is an old motorsport. Not the oldest, but it's old. And if we didn't rethink things, we wouldn't have had all the crazy stuff that happened in the last 7 or so decades. So I like that. But I think we got to be careful. And I think we will be careful. I think F1 will be careful when making changes like that.
Yeah, I think I know Verstappen was pretty against changing up the weekends. He had made mention of all of it coming into this weekend at the Australian Grand Prix, and the hesitation for him to have to comment on all of it. He didn't really hold back. He did just say, look, the DNA of Formula One should stay the DNA of Formula One, where you have your Friday practice, your Saturday qualifying, and your Sunday race. And look, I get it, and I understand what he's saying, and I mean, obviously he has a bit of his own agenda at the same time, but on the other side of this, I mean, I wouldn't mind them taking away some practice, because what that's going to end up doing is it can spice things up, because I mean, the engineers aren't going to have enough data, the drivers aren't going to have enough data, because they haven't done a ton of track time. So if you can find a way, like George Russell had said, like to give that time to the younger drivers, like either the rookies, giving them more track time, or giving it to the feeder series, so giving it to F2 or F3, because I mean, Samarth, those drivers, they get very little track time during an F1 weekend, man. Like, it's brutal.
This weekend was especially brutal, I thought, in the feeder series. So, yeah. And you could probably see the result of it as well. Those are some chaotic races. Yeah. I mean, I like that attitude, for what Russell said. That's a good point. And I wouldn't complain if the weekend was just really spicy every day. I mean, that's cool, right?
Yeah, for sure. It gives us something to have an invested interest in. I mean, every single day. I mean, whether or not what you're doing on Friday, it makes any sense to do anything that day, or you just kind of leave that as your practice, and then you do everything. Like, you kind of jam in you condense your Saturdays, where you jam that full of action, and you jam your Sunday full of action. I'd be up for that. I mean, I'm always up to see new things and see what it does. I'm not too fond of this proposal for Baku, though. I liked how they used the sprint race to set the grid for Sunday, and I liked how they did qualifying on Friday to set that grid, and so then you had your practice mixed in with those two things, and I kind of actually liked how that went, because we don't really need like two qualifying sessions, right? You get the car dialed in for the one quali session. That's what we watch for, right?
What's the like? That's a headache as well, right?
Yeah,
for them. I don't know.
It's gotta
be. Getting my own head around whatever proposed thing that might be. That's wild.
Right.
I'd kind of like to see it unfold in a way. Just like, all right, but I mean, I don't know. That's crazy. Let's see though. I mean, Azerbaijan's not far away. It's 30 days away, huh?
It's not. So I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the next coming weeks for sure. Let's go over to Twitter. There's quite a few questions for us. So we'll try and answer as much as we can. I don't think we can get to all of them, as we're running out of time. But from Nick Ignatov, this may be for you, Samarth, but he said, can you explain why Sainz's penalty wasn't just erased? So if they pretend the lap didn't exist and just do it again, put all the drivers back in their old positions, then penalties shouldn't happen for that lap either. And it's something similar to what you and I had already spoken about, but still, like...
Yeah, the way I see it is still a consequence for the action he took. In the same way, I think Gasly and Ocon could have faced penalties, but it was just seen as a racing incident. But they still investigated it because it did happen. No one actually disappeared that lap. It's just a lap that disappeared. They still had to make their way back to the pits and do everything safely. So, yeah, I think it felt a bit harsh, but I think it was fair.
Why was the FIA... This is from Matt Turner. So why was the FIA really concerned? Okay, so was the FIA really concerned with safety, showing the red flag on lap 56, or were they trying to have an entertaining finish? Well, yeah, it's like we had mentioned earlier, Matt. I think one of the things was for the debris that was on the track. Samarth did make mention that, there is a lot of metal shavings and bits within the wheels themselves when they come apart, and it does spread across the track. And it's easy to pick up punctures with these things at the same time, and you got to clean it all up. And if you want to have green flag finishes, and you only have a few laps left to finish the race, so if you're circulating behind the safety car, you're not going to get that. So you do have to throw a red flag in that moment. But at the same time, recovery truck out on the track as well, and then at the same time, like we had mentioned, the green flag finishes that F1 and some of the team members would like to see. From Jim, so this is at Hockey in Ottawa. Is Mercedes' podium a real indicator of effective upgrades, or did they just work well at this particular track? So I don't think, Jim, they brought any upgrades to this race, but Samarth, what do you think about Mercedes' weekend that they just kind of came through here? Because it was pretty impressive.
They were surprised, right?
Yeah.
I think lower temperatures suited them. The track layout suited them, as we touched on before. That medium downforce, sort of kind of medium high speed corners suited them. Let's not forget that Perez had to start last. Leclerc dropped out early, and Sainz was stuck in his own battle behind the Astons. So it wasn't just right place, right time. It was the conditions suiting them too.
From Nicholas Egan, why were there so many crashes today? Seemed like the drivers had a hard time keeping the cars on the track all weekend. Well,
that's a fair question.
Yeah. There actually, there was the GPS situation that they had with traffic, and I think that was a big thing for a lot of the teams on the Friday. And then actually, traffic actually seemed like more of an issue this weekend than normal. I mean, again, they had the GPS issue on the Friday, but same with like Saturday. There was still traffic issues. It was quite bizarre, Samarth. Like, did you feel the same way? Because I did. I didn't understand why we had so much traffic.
No, I think it makes sense. I think people forget that this is a street track. This is a narrow, and like these cars are big. And Australia as a country is big. The track is narrow and tiny, and the confines of the circuit are like tough to navigate. So, I'm just glad I had to clarify that Australia is a big country. I don't want to offend any Australians. No. It makes sense, and it also makes sense that cooler temperatures mean that it's harder to warm up your tires. Cautions breed cautions, as we've seen in NASCAR and IndyCar. So, yeah, same thing.
Let's see here. Oh my God. Okay, from Jace Andrews. Are we reaching the point of no return with Leclerc at Ferrari, Samarth?
Whoa, that's one heck of a question for a Sunday evening.
Sorry,
dude.
Leclerc and Ferrari, but still.
The point of no return? Oh, come on, it's Ferrari. There's no point of no return.
I was going to say that.
No, I think they have a lot to fight for. Leclerc still hasn't won Monaco, right? It's such a short-term goal. But they need to focus on short-term goals. This is going to be another transitional year. They're not the only team to have a transitional year, and they're not the only team to have had a rough start to the season. I think there's reasons to smile over there. Just very difficult to see them right now.
Yeah, and that pretty much does it. I mean, we got a bunch more, but I know you got to get running, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this, Samarth. I know you've had a pretty busy day as well. So, thanks again, man, for coming onto the podcast and for doing that. Let everybody know, actually, where they can find you on social media and what you're working on, because you've actually had some great articles come out ever since you've been working for F1. I mean, they're incredible. Like, your writing is awesome.
That's very flattering, Tim. That's really nice of you. So you can catch me on @Samarth Kanal on Twitter. We're working on some really cool stuff. F1 Unlocked is this thing where we go for more in-depth interviews and news. Yeah, I know it's a bit annoying having to sign up for something new, but do it. It's fun. And I've got a good interview coming up soon with an F1 race winner. That'll be fun. And it was great catching up with you, Tim. Appreciate it. And I'm sorry to everyone about the mess here. I am moving house. So it's just carnage. It's carnage down here, man.
It's carnage on the track in Australia.
Yeah, man.
It's carnage
I bring
in
it
the
to
house.
my home. Yeah.
It's awesome. Dude, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Big thanks to Samarth for coming on to the show. Really appreciate his time. Let's head on over to Grid Rival, and we'll go over the top 10 in the SDPN official Grid Rival pool for 2023. And our top 10, well, we've seen a shakeup at the top of the charts, J. Hamilton 98 leading the way with 3,164 points by the looks of it. Underneath, in second, Salary Cap Lupul, 3,125 points, tied for second. Now, we've got a couple tied for second, but I'm just going to basically say that these are all in the top 10. We have Junk 81321471. Jay Wyshak, apologies if I mispronounced that, in fourth. In fifth, what do we got here? Kosuni. In sixth, Contarian. Oh my god, I'm brutal at this. Seventh, Sidomo. In eighth is Scotty Wilk in ninth. So ninth actually has dropped some positions. So this is Jeremy DeZang. And in 10th, Feldman. It's Feldman from across the hall. In 10th, rounding out the top 10. Where did I end up? Let's have a look, because I haven't even, checked out my team. Oh, it's huge movements for Hall in the Mail. I was in 64th, now 25th. I'm coming for y'all. You just don't know it yet. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening and watching. If you want more from me, I'm Tim Haraney. You can catch me on social media at Tim Haraney. We'll have some fun podcasts coming up this week. We're going to be doing an IndyCar Texas review pod on the Wednesday. Have a special guest coming on for that, so stay tuned. And then at the end of the week, we have a very special IndyCar guest who's going to be coming on to the program to talk about their racing career. So thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to y'all later.